noticed the other day when I replaced the front strut that the boot on the CV axle was busted open. And since this is my beach car, even though it's not damaged yet, it will eventually be damaged because it'll get sand down in there and that'll destroy those bearings that are underneath that boot. Go ahead and jack this up. Again, I'm using just tools that I would typically have on the road. So if I ever have to do a repair like this, I know exactly what I've got, know exactly what to bring with me. And we'll put it up underneath the body or the frame. All right. Gotta take this axle nut out, and here's this little bent location. Now I've already had this off because I replaced these struts. So I'm hoping, because I used the proper torque specifications, that I don't have a problem breaking this loose. So we're gonna take this off. This is what is actually mounted directly to that CB axle. And so I don't want it to be any harder to take off than possible. I'm just using an old screwdriver, so you could use a punch, anything to kind of get that out. 36 metric impact driver. We're gonna try to break that loose. Comes. So we're gonna get that ball joint busted loose. We're gonna start here with the nuts first. Good. All right, so I'm gonna thread the old axle nut back on there. Not too far, and just give a couple of taps. This should already be loose, but if you're having trouble breaking that loose, you can spray some penetrating oil around there. I don't need to do that because I've already had this off when I put the front strut on. So, you know, I know this is gonna be loose enough. But just in case you're having those issues, that's the reason I'll often save the used axle nut so that I can use it so I don't damage the threads. All right. I'm just going to bang that down, and then I just want to pry it loose so that I can swing that arm out and separate these two. So now what I'm going to do is just grab up here and pull so that I can get these out. And this is you can see grease leaking out of here, but I noticed the other day when I pulled on this that not only was grease leaking out, but it had a huge hole on one side. And then I'm gonna pull this to the side as far as I can and get that CV axle out of there. So now I need a place for this to go. So I'm gonna take a tie down strap and pull it and get it out of my way so that I can pop this CV axle loose and get it out so that we can replace it. So all I've done is just taken a tie down strap, hook it in that brake caliper, and then I'm just going to tension this so that I can pull it as far as I can so it's out of my way so I have plenty of room to work. So you notice all that tension on the brake line. When I started using that tie down, I noticed that I was putting a lot of tension on there. I don't want to break that thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this brake line off, and then I'll pull it out of the way so we can get that axle out of there. So we're gonna take that pry bar right here, and I'm kind of wedged up in there. Acting like a punch, and punched on it till I got it out of there. So now you can see how that slides on. Pry it loose. We're going to put that side in there first, so that port that I just showed you where there's gears will line up. We're going to place that in and slide it on. If you were on the driver's side near the transmission for the front CV axle, it's going to have a port similar to that that slides into the transmission. Here, since we're on the passenger side, we actually have the port coming out from that extension, and we're going to slide that on there. So if you have any trouble trying to get that back in place, try to get it lined up, you may want to give it a tap with your hammer. Now be careful with it. In order to do that, you're going to want to put the old nut on the new CV axle and kind of give it a tap.
Got the older CV axle nut on. Didn't want to damage any threads. So let's give it a few love taps. We'll try to keep it as straight as possible so we can drive that back and try to get it into position. So we want it right up against that extension. There we go. Now it's in place. So we can take the older nut off. All right, we got it all greased up. I'm gonna relieve that tension from the tie-down strap. Try to get it as straight as possible. Give it a little wiggle. There we go. And then it should slide right in. I'm gonna run that new CV axle bolt down. Just press down on that. Try to slide those into place. There we go. Now we can run our bolts back down. We got the two nuts and the bolt. So two nuts closest to us, and then the bolt goes in just behind that. Both the nuts and the bolts. I'm just gonna tighten them down so they're snug, but I might have to torque these. So I'll have to go get the torque specs for the ball joint. I have the axle nut somewhere, so I'll look that up too. By taking the brake line out, or not taking it off, but just taking it off this mount, that allowed us more room. Made it easier to get the axle out and really to get it back in. So I'm going to tighten this back down. I just want to tighten it by hand, make sure I'm not stripping anything, and then we'll tighten it down with our ratchet. Torque these down to 38 foot-pounds. There we go, heard it click. All right, here we go. All right, now we're gonna do the last one. So that's actually the bolt. All right, 38 foot-pounds for that one. Unless you have rims where you can still access it. But for me, my spare's small enough, it makes it really easy to get in there. I'm gonna put that back on, then I'm gonna lower it down, and then we'll torque this. All right, 133 foot-pounds. Let's torque this down. There we go. And now we're gonna notch that in. All right, so I'm gonna use one of my impact wrenches as a punch. We'll bend that in, mainly because it's got a huge flathead screwdriver at the end of it. Before I jack it up. I think that one was already loose. I don't think I tightened it down. I'll jack this thing back up real quick. And we'll tighten these back down. I think these are supposed to be 80 foot-pounds, 80 or 90 foot-pounds. I always just do it by hand. I've never had an issue, but if you want to be really safe, you'll torque your lug nuts down too. All right, that is it for today.